Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my fall TBR. I'm going to be talking about all of the books that have been on my radar for this season, all of the spooky reads that I kind of want to get into. I feel like everyone, when it hits fall, is very much in their fantasy era. I feel like everyone always has a fantasy fall, but I am very much in the mood to have a spooky thriller mystery type of fall. I want to read a lot of horror books, thrillers, and then on top of that I also do want to read some witchy romances. So I made a little list of books that I'm into and want to kind of get to this fall, and we're going to talk about that in today's video. If you don't already have a little drink, grab one. I made a little homemade pumpkin spice chai. It actually is pretty good, which I'm very surprised about because I feel like I always mess up a at-home chai, even though it's probably the easiest drink to make. And that is good. Beware, this list is not in any order. We're going to be skipping around in different genres and different authors. The first book is actually a book that I mentioned in my last video, which was a fall book haul, and it is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. Now, that being said, literally the day after I filmed that haul video, I got a video on my TikTok For You page of someone who is very disappointed in this book. So I am nervous to read this book, but the cover is absolutely beautiful and it is a Shakespeare retelling. It seems to be kind of a fantasy, whimsical vibe. This woman is in an arranged marriage, I believe it is. Her husband doesn't know that she has powers, and she also doesn't know that he has ties to the occult. That's all I really know about the book. I feel like I'm the worst at explaining books when it is TBR videos because I go into my books pretty blindly. But yeah, I picked that book up, obviously had it in that book haul, and I've just been hearing some mixed reviews. Some people have said it's really boring. I haven't read Ava Reid's writing before. I think I tried to read A Study in Drowning, but I didn't get very far into it. So I'm not sure about that book, but that is on my fall TBR. I actually was gonna pick it up this past week, but I didn't get around to it. I'm very intrigued by it. I think the cover is beautiful, and I will fall for a beautiful book cover. This is another book that I picked up due to the cover. I picked this up earlier this year, and it is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I remember Heather McClary read this book back when it first came out, and she said to save it for the fall, that it would be a better atmospheric read. Again, not really sure what this book is about. Let's look it up. I also don't think I've read anything by Leigh Bardugo. I do think I've heard that her writing is very like whimsical and almost kind of hard to read. So I am nervous for this book. So this book takes place in Spain, and it is a historical fantasy set in the Spanish Gold Age. The mistress of the house discovers that the servant is using her hidden talent for little miracles. She demands that she uses those gifts for the family's social position. What begins as simple amusement for the bored nobility takes a perilous turn when Lucia garners the attention of Antonio Perez, the disgraced secretary to Spain's king. Still reeling from the defeat for his Armada, the king is desperate for any advantage in the war against England's heretic queen. Perez will stop at nothing to regain the king's favor. The only thing I ever knew about the book was that it took place in colonial Spain, and I'm excited for it. I've been getting more into literary fictions within that sort of, I don't even know what, like the TikToks where it's like what the cool girl reads. I've been getting into those types of books. Right now I'm reading Slooh Foot, which is a book that takes place in 1600s Puritan New England. It is about a witch and the devil, and that one is also one that is on this TBR. But I've been getting into that sort of group of books that almost feel like they take a little bit more brain power to read. They're just very interesting stories. I feel like I've been reading for so long and I've read so many books. I'm very much wanting to find books that feel like brand new stories to me. So I am excited to read that book and hopefully like it. I don't really remember if I've heard a lot about that book. I feel like I haven't. It came out back in May, and I think Heather's the only person that I know that has read it. One more book kind of within this like group of books that I feel fits really well in it, and this is The Ministry of Time. This is, I believe, technically a romance mixed with like a literary fiction, and it is about our main character who works for like an agency that does time traveling and brings historical figures into the future to see how they would work, and she has to work with a subject who I think they end up falling in love. Now, I've been waiting for this from my library for the longest time, but very very recently, I've actually gotten the hold and I've had to keep giving it to the next person in line because I've just been in the middle of reading books when I've gotten it. But the next time that book comes in on my holds list, I'm getting that book and I'm gonna read it. I'm very excited to see what all the hype is about because I know Haley Pham gave it 5 stars, but I feel like a lot of booktubers have really been liking that book. This next book is another book that I actually read last year through my library, but I did a softie enough of it, and it is The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic. Now this is another witchy sort of romance book. The only thing I really remember about this book is it was either before each chapter or at the beginning of each chapter. There actually is a recipe in the book. But what this book is about, this book is supposed to be a combination of like practical magic and Gilmore Girls. It is about our main character Sadie. She's always believed that the curse of 4 heartbreaks that accompanies her magic would be worth the price. But when her grandmother is diagnosed with cancer with only weeks to live and her first heartbreak, Jake McNeely, returns to town after a decade, her carefully structured life begins to unravel. With the news of their grandmother's impending death, Sadie's estranged twin brother Seth returns to town, bringing with him deeply buried family secrets that threaten to tear Sadie's world apart. Their grandmother has been the backbone of the family for generations, and with her death, Sadie isn't sure that she'll have the strength to keep the family and her magic together. As feelings for Jake begin to rekindle, her grandmother growing sicker by the day, Sadie faces the last of her heartbreaks, and she has to decide, is love more important than magic? This book is one of the witchy romances that I don't ever really hear people talk about. I feel like the most common ones are the X-Hex, which I read last year, and then also the Secret Society for Witches or for Irregular Witches. I don't remember what the full title is, but I feel like those are always the top 2 witchy romance books that are recommended. I've also been seeing, I think this is a romance book, but it's like the Pumpkin Spice Cafe or something like that. I've been seeing so many people haul this just absolutely cute little book. Every time I see the book, it literally looks like Lorelai Gilmore wrote it. Like it looks like it came straight out of the Gilmore Girls set. I'm interested to see what that one's about. I need to do like a fall haul or like book trip to Barnes just to scout. Some of my favorite table layouts are their fall like witchy reads. Kind of want to like scour and see if I can find any witchy reads that no one has really mentioned and see if I can find any hidden gems in the bookstore. This next book on my TBR is another witchy romance, and this one I think I saw on TikTok. It is Happy Medium by Sarah Adler. This is about a con woman, and she basically has to convince this farmer that she can, I think it's get a demon or like a ghost out of the house. But obviously she's a con woman and the farmer doesn't actually believe that the yard is haunted, and so it is a romance between those 2 people, and that's all I know about the book. It sounds fun, sounds like honestly like silly. I think if I start reading any like witchy romance books, it's gonna be end of September going into October, and then throughout October I really want to start reading like horror books. I kind of want to get into Stephen King. I've never read a Stephen King book before. I know I don't want to read it. I've gotten some of it explained to me. I have no interest in reading that book. I'm thinking about, I think it's Pet Sematary. So if that book is worth it, if that would be good, let me know. I don't have a whole lot of like thrillers or horror books on my TBR. When I pick out thriller or like horror books, most of the time I don't actually have a full TBR for like thriller books, unless it's an author that is like an auto buy, like a Riley Sager, Lisa Jewell. I actually don't think I've ever read a Lisa Jewell book, so I take that back. But like a Lucy Foley, like thriller author names that I recognize, unless it's someone like that, I usually don't have thriller books on my radar. I'll just go through my library's Libby app and see if there's any plots that just really intrigue me. So that's why this TBR list doesn't really have a lot of thriller or horror books. But yeah, I do want to read a Stephen King book this year. Honestly, I just want to dabble more in the horror genre, but I want it to be horror paranormal. I don't want it to be like horror like slasher is what I was trying to say. I was gonna say Thrasher, which I'm pretty sure is that skateboard brand. As I'm going down this list, I'm realizing that these are literally all just witchy romances, but sue me. The next book is a book that I've been talking about so much recently, and this is At Last Sight by Julie Johnson. This is book 2 of the Witchy City series. I forget what it's called. I read the first book last year, absolutely loved it. I've not shut up about the book. In the first book, we follow our main character who owns an occult shop, and then basically sacrifices start happening outside of her shop. She has a private investigator that's trying to figure out who is doing the sacrifices, figure out if the main character is in danger, but they also have a connection from before, and it is a romance between them. It's a funny romance, but it's also like a mystery. It was just so good, loved it, haven't shut up about it. And so book 2 is about a character from the first book. She is a psychic, and then this one is another sort of like mystery with, I think it's a cop in this one. So I'm excited to see that, see what she did with this world and where the story went. And then I have one more witchy romance, and that is Best Hex Ever. I saw this one on TikTok as well. This book takes place in London. Our main character works in a kitchen. I think it's like a bakery, or she's like a head chef. And our male main character is the new curator for the British Museum. And our main character has like the worst love life. So she decides that he's going to be worth trying to break a hex that was put on her. And yeah, I don't remember exactly why I put this on my TBR, but I also just really love the cover. I think it's very Halloween-y, and I just thought the title was really funny. Next is a book that I actually think this book takes place in summer, but it was just released, and it is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I'm pretty sure this takes place in a summer camp. I'm not fully sure what the plot is about, but the cover just really stood out to me because it has this like pink drippiness on it. But yeah, I have no idea. I think it is a thriller. I could be totally wrong about that, but that one is on my radar. And then another literary fiction book that is on my radar for this fall is Husbands. I got this recommendation from a Haley Pham video. She read this book, and from my understanding, it is about our main character who has this attic. She wakes up one day and she has a husband, but like she doesn't have a husband, and all of a sudden she has a husband. And then he goes up into the attic and basically a different guy will come down who is her husband. I think is the premise of that story. Could be totally wrong. That one just intrigues me. I think the idea of the story is very interesting, and I'm excited to see what the author did with the story. I think it could teach you a lot about life and love, so I'm excited to test that book out. Another book I want to get to this fall that I'm honestly surprised I haven't read yet. I don't know how to say it. It's either Scythe or Scythe. I've heard it both ways. This is a YA dystopian book, I believe. In the society where this book takes place, humanity has overcome death and illness. So the Scythes or the Scythes are the only thing that can bring death. They're basically like the Grim Reaper. And our main character, I believe, is training to become one, but I think it's that they don't agree with what they do. I think this one is a trilogy, and it's like a cult classic. A lot of people really love it. I've just never read it. I've never really been interested in the story until very recently. I'm very sad though. I thought this book would be at my library and it's not, so I will have to go to Barnes and go get a copy of this story before I can dive into it. And then the last book that is on my list is Their Vicious Games by Joelle Wellington. So this one is another YA book, and this is actually a YA thriller, I believe. So in this book, our main character is trying to get into an Ivy League college, and there ends up being a contest or like a competition to get into the college, but I believe it's like a life or death situation. I think this book is just following the competition itself and the main character and all of the sort of like social problems within that hierarchy. I am very excited to also dive into that one. This fall TBR doesn't even have like the books that I just bought. I'm very excited to read The Invocations, which I just hauled. I would also really like to read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. That was actually on my TBR for this past spring, but I'm pretty sure someone had left a comment saying that that book would actually be better to read. It was either during fall or winter, so I think I might save that for like November time. I have so many books on my radar. I'm in this mood of wanting to read like intense stories about real life people or fictional characters, but more so in that thriller fiction world or a mystery horror fiction or a mystery horror fiction world versus like a fantasy fiction world. So yeah, that was my fall TBR for 2024. I hope either you got some book ideas or I don't know, got some entertainment for like 10 minutes from this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe, check out my other videos, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Every time I film a video after work, I kid you not, my brain is like melted and I don't know if I actually explained myself right. So I'm sorry if this video is a mess.